Do you remember when we once turned a cheap foam glider like this into a radio-controlled model? Well, this time we've gone bigger and spent $5 on this absolutely huge airplane. Just compare their sizes. Our previous model looks like a little kid next to this giant, and it could easily fit on one of its wings. After checking its aerodynamic properties, I realized that it could make an excellent radio-controlled aircraft. The wingspan was 85 centimeters, compared to just 49 of the old one. And without a motor and the electronics, it weighs only 129 grams. First of all, I decided to open the canopy, but the manufacturer glued it shut, so I had to use all the strength of my incredibly powerful hands to reach the cockpit. Instead of a pilot, I found this big metal ball inside, weighing over 32 grams. Our plane will be much lighter without it, which will allow us to install stronger servos and more powerful motor. As before, we'll hide all the electronics in the cockpit, and since this plane is twice as large, we will have a lot more internal space to work with. Using a ruler and a pencil, I marked and began cutting the ailerons. They were moving too tightly in the wing, so I had to cut out a bit more foam to give them extra clearance. I thought that the plane's grey color looked a bit dull, so I decided to give its wings a little color. I used a brush to apply some acrylic paint to the surface. Once the paint dried, I sprayed a light coat of clear varnish on top to make it more resistant to damage. Then I removed the masking tape. All done! Now the airplane looks much better. This time the ailerons will be moved by this servo. It's almost twice the size of the previous one, and thanks to its transparent casing, we can actually see what's inside. The servo is installed right behind the cockpit, in a slot I cut out with a utility knife. A bit of hot glue will keep it firmly in place. The next important step was to cut away some material on the aileron at a 45-degree angle to make sure it can move freely downward. As before, I attached it using reinforced tape, but for extra reliability I decided to secure it with metal staples from this staple gun. Since the foam is quite soft and the staples don't hold very well in it, I took some super glue, drew it into a syringe with a thin needle, and carefully injected a small amount of it near the base of each staple leg, thus fixing them much more securely in place. Now, we attach the linkage mounts to the ailerons and screw a double horn onto the servo motor. It's very important to choose a wire that's both strong and flexible, so it can reliably transmit force from the servo to the ailerons. We also had to make an elevator on the tail of the plane. To do that, we removed the red part of the fuselage and made several cuts to the black section. You'll see why in a second. Our small ruler turned out to be the perfect size, so I simply traced the outline with a marker and cut out the elevator. We fixed it in place the same way, using reinforced tape, and then put the piece back where it belongs. The chief engineer took a look and said that it was pretty good. For the tail part, we brought an ultra-small servo that weighs only 5 grams. But the cool thing is that all of its gears are made of metal instead of plastic, so it can handle much heavier loads. I got curious about how much weight such a tiny 5-gram servo could lift, so I mounted it on a test stand. Just look at this! It easily lifted a can that was 65 times heavier than itself. It was just playing with it. This time we cut a recess for the servo directly into the rear wing. And connected it to the elevator with a short piece of wire. But I completely forgot that the servo's wires wouldn't reach the cockpit since they were too short. so I had to cut them and solder in 3 extension wires between them and the 2 ends. Even though I insulated the solder joints with heat-shrinking tubing, I was still worried that the wires might get wet from the dew in case of a crash or snag on a branch. So I made a shallow channel in the foam running from the tail to the cockpit using a popsicle stick, carefully pressed the wires into it one by one. In the end, they reached the cockpit perfectly, all hidden inside the plane's body. To make the plane fly as long as possible, I ordered this high-quality, quite expensive 850 mAh battery. Actually, I ordered 2 of these and 1 cheap Chinese backup just in case. Moreover, I bought a more powerful electronic speed controller, up to 15 amps, compared to the 6 one we used in the previous model. And the most important upgrade is this awesome new motor. At a first glance it looked a bit too massive, and hence too heavy. So I decided to weigh it. Whoa, 30 grams! That's way too much. That same evening I went online and found another motor with the same power, but much smaller in size. The manufacturer made it as lightweight as possible, so the airplane could fly longer and faster. This one weighed only 17 grams. Perfect. To attach the motor, we first need to cut off the plane's nose and then shape a proper mounting place with a knife or a soldering iron. After that, pierce the foam right through the wooden stick and secure the motor to the front of the plane using ordinary rubber bands. We did the exact same thing last time, and that setup worked perfectly on our smaller model. Install a power switch to control the airplane's electrical circuit. Then comes our time-tested Chinese control board. It was important to run its 2 antennas outside to improve the radio signal reception. There was enough space inside the cockpit to fit the battery, but would raise the airplane's center of gravity a bit too high. Therefore, I carefully cut out a recess underneath the cabin. And place the battery there instead. To keep it from falling out, I use this Velcro cable strap, secured with a bit of hot glue. I was worried that the electronics might overheat inside the closed cockpit, so I made a few small holes in the canopy with a soldering iron, just enough to provide some ventilation. Time to turn on the remote control and test the servos. And the motor? Oh, I almost forgot about the propeller. It must be high quality, flexible and damage resistant. I bought a pack of these rubber bands to mount it securely. The total weight of the airplane came out to 209 grams, even though I was aiming for 200 grams. At least the center of gravity is in a perfect spot, right under the front part of the wing. The plane looks awesome, and I can't wait to test it out. This time though, I decided not to repeat my previous mistake. Back then I had almost no experience flying RC airplanes, and that led to quite a few crashes. I went online and downloaded a simple flight simulator. It was only 65 megabytes. In addition, I bought a cable from China that allowed me to connect the controller to my computer and use it as a gamepad. It was just a perfect way to learn how to fly. I could experiment however I wanted without putting my real model at risk. I decided to spend a few days practicing in the simulator before flying the real thing. When the plane flies away from you, everything's simple. Push the stick to the right and it turns right. But once it's facing you, that's when trouble starts. Pushing the stick right now makes the plane turn left. And it's surprisingly hard for the human brain to switch between these two modes of control. After a few days of training, we went out to the field, which together with the blue sky and the clouds looked absolutely stunning. At that very moment, a flock of wild pigeons flew over us. They formed a smiling face in the sky with their bodies. and I took it as a sign that everything would work out. If they can fly, so can our airplane. In the first few seconds, the wind started to push the plane to the side. I tried to level it out, but it barely responded to my commands and fell to the ground. I immediately realized the problem. The ailerons didn't have enough movement range. The only thing I could do was move the wire linkage to the holes that were closer to the aileron's rotation axis. And it worked! The main challenge with flying an airplane, unlike a quadricopter, is that it can't stop in mid-air or take a break. The plane must keep moving, and the pilot has to think quickly and make decisions constantly. At first, I didn't fly too high, just in case of a crash, so it would fall from a low height. But then, I got used to the controls. I became more confident and started flying higher, even doing some tricks intentionally. We had this small camera, so I decided to attach it to the tail of the plane using this self-made mount. Thus, we'll have an opportunity to see everything from first-person view. The plane's motor easily lifted the extra weight into the air, but it became much harder to control it, so I couldn't keep it in the air for too long. Still, it was enough time to show you how the airplane's control system works mid-flight, and how actively the ailerons have to move to keep it stable. Notice how much the wings bend during moments of great overload. I spent several hours in this magical field, enjoying the flight of our plane. Controlling this model is much easier than the previous ones, likely due to the large wingspan. I get a special kind of joy when I manage to turn an ordinary cheap thing into something way more interesting and cool. And this was exactly one of those cases.